Ugandan Watchman. Be sure to check us out on YouTube at Ugandan Watchman. Search for Ugandan Watchman, that is, and you will see the previous segments that we've had and we've spoken about on various subjects, most of them concerning the end times and the soon return of the Lord. But now I'm continuing with something to do with coming out of Babylon. This is the second segment. The first one, I spoke about 3 mindsets with which people give, and that's why they do not receive a return as the word of God promises. I said I've made people give to the work of God, but give with the mindset of a gambler. I've made those who give with the mindset of a businessman, and those who give with the proper mindset, the one of a sower. Now, those I explained in the previous segment. Now I'm going on to tell you how a sower thinks. And the previous segment I told you a sower is very mindful of the ground where he sows his seed. Now that's very different from all the others. So a sower is very mindful of the ground. Now I'll tell you this, the scripture which the Lord revealed to me when he was showing me some of these things. And I'd read this scripture like every other believer over and over again, even those who are not usual Bible readers know about the parable of the sower. But let's read it again so that you learn something from it that you probably do not know up until now. It says, listen, behold, the sower went out to sow. So it's one sower. And it happened as he sowed that some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds of the air came and devoured it. Some fell on stony ground, where it did not have much earth, and immediately it sprang up, because it had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, it was scorched, and because it had no root, it withered away. Then he says that, and some seed fell among thorns, and thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no fruit, no crop. But other seed fell on good ground, and yielded a crop that sprang up, increased, and produced some 30-fold, some 60-fold, some 100-fold. Now in verse 13, in verse 14, it says the sower sowed the word. Now that means the word and everything that the word says, including the message of sowing. Okay? So now some people jump out of it and say, no, Jesus said the sower is the word. The word is everything the word says. Okay? Now the word says, give and it will be given unto you. The word says so many things. Sow bountifully and you reap bountifully. Sow sparingly and you reap sparingly. You know all those scriptures. So now I'm explaining this to you in the way that the Lord showed it to me, and in a way that revolutionized my giving and my receiving, most importantly. First of all, it says, remember, notice this. It is the same sower, it is the same seed. And most probably it's even the same day of sowing. But there are 6 different outcomes. The only thing that changes is the ground. Same seed, same sower, same day of sowing, 6 outcomes. The only thing that changes in between is the ground. Now that's why ground is very important. Now he says, some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds of the air came and devoured it. Now, when it comes to the message of giving, I know that there are certain places, there's certain ground, which is wayside, where birds will immediately devour what you've sowed. I know that for a fact. I have been there. And I have witnessed people, more importantly, who have been there. Now, what do birds represent in this case? Birds are representative of death. You remember the story of, when Joseph was in prison in the book of Genesis, and 2 of Pharaoh's servants came and gave him their dreams. One of them said that he was holding, a basket of Pharaoh's bread, and birds came and, were eating the bread off his head. And how did Joseph interpret that dream? He said, Pharaoh is going to cut off your head. In other words, you're going to die. So the birds were representative of death. And you know that, when they come for a feast, there's going to be big death. Actually, Ezekiel, talking about when the war of Gog and Magog. So birds are representative of death. Now, there are certain places where you will go and put your money, and it will bring death. And sometimes it is instant death. I have seen that in the life of some people. I remember the first time I met a preacher who had come from such depth of poverty. But here is a man who somehow believed God that he would be rich. So one day he got a piece of land which was very cheap, but which meant a lot to him because he was in absolute destitution. It had a bit of a house, it had a plantation, something. So it was his dream place. Now he went to the owner of the land and he got the price of the land. And it wasn't even so much. I won't tell you details, but it was little money by the standards of even average, very average people. But for him, it was quite an amount of money. So he said he went around a piece of land, went around it and said, God, this land will not be sold until I have the money for it. And guess what? God was faithful in that bit. For 2 years, he collected money, coin by coin. For 2 years, he had the money to finally go and buy the piece of land. Now, on the day that he went, the money finally reached the magic amount. And the following day, he was going to call up the owner of the land. They meet, they sign an agreement, and he purchases the piece of land. That night, he arrives home to his wife, and he's very happy. Finally, we have the money. And as they are praying and thanking God, he told me he heard very clearly the Lord telling him, I want you to get that money and go and give it to somebody else. Now, here is the thing. The person to whom he was supposed to give the money is somebody who had a job, a good corporate job, and the Lord had told him to quit that job and go and start a church. And the Lord told him, I will look after you. Now, that's the looking after was that the first money he was supposed to get as a fulfillment of God's promise to look after him was the money which had taken this man 2 years to collect, So he had two options, either to disobey the Lord and go and buy the land, or to obey the Lord. Thankfully, he chose the second option. So the next day, he did not even tell his wife. He just woke up, got the money, took a bus, and went to where that pastor is, and in tears told him, I know for sure the Lord has told me to give you this money, but you just know that this is my life. This is not just money, this is my life. It has taken me 2 years of rigorous saving to even come up with this. So both of them cried, and it ended. So the man went back home, and I'm going to cut a really long story short. When I met him a few years after that, a number of things that happened. First of all, he had a he had a very good life. He had a number of cars. He had 2 houses in the city, which he owned, which were his houses. And it had happened over a period of a short time. And he told me he knew it started that day when he obeyed the Lord. His children were going to good schools. The piece of land, which he forfeited by giving the money, incidentally remained unsold until much later when he bought it. But now he was not buying it as a lifesaver. He was buying it as part of other pieces of land he had. So now, this gentleman, having come out of total destitution and come into a life of fair abundance, and on his way upwards, came and ran into another preacher in the city whom he respected because he preaches well, and so on. But that preacher, everybody knows, has one small problem. He's stingy. He's extremely stingy. But this guy came and met him and was wondering. Now, the funny thing is, he was wondering why this powerful preacher was driving a very old car that was spewing smoke everywhere it went. So he went to the church of that preacher and told them that, listen, people, we have to collect money for your pastor. How can your pastor be driving such a ramshackle car and all of you are here and you're feeding off him? So he made the fundraising. We are collecting money to buy the pastor a car. And he himself gave a generous amount as the beginning point for the fundraising. The funny thing is, he told me himself, I'm not telling what somebody told me, as soon as he gave his contribution towards buying that pastor's car, within a matter of 1 week, he had lost both his cars. It was almost supernatural how he lost them. One mistake, the other, they take the car. The next thing I knew, the man had no car. So I wondered, wow. Now that is an example of somebody who is dead. You sow there, the seed does not just die. In this thing of spiritual things, the worst thing that can happen to you is not that you lose your seed. No, that's not the worst. The worst is that the seed you give in bad ground, in death, will come even for the things you already had and take them. Now this man lost his car. Actually, I warned him. I told him, stop sowing in that place. But he would not listen to me because the person I was telling him not to sow to is a renowned pastor. But he's also renowned for his stinginess, extreme stinginess. So he continued sowing there and he continued going down and down and down. The next thing I knew, all his financial resources had almost vanished, almost supernaturally. And I kept on warning him, stop sowing in that place because that place is death. Now, there are places where you will sow, and the minute you sow, something happens in the negative that takes away even what you already had. Now you know the birds have come and eat, that you're sowing into death. And unfortunately, when you sow, you're sowing into somebody's heart, the person. So this person, you enter into his judgment. The person is stingy, everything about him is, blocked. So you go and put your money in that blocked place and you reap of that. So that is the first person who sows into birds, into death. Now move fast forward and say, some fell on stony ground where it did not have much earth, and immediately it sprang up because it had no earth. But when the sun was up, it was scorched, and because it had no root, it withered. Now, I've been a witness of this kind of sowing, where I sowed into a church where I attended, but the pastor did not believe in the laws of sowing and reaping. This whole message was just something he taught when the church needed money for this, for that, for the other, and it was more or less contributing rather than sowing. Now, these are two different things. God does not ask you to contribute. God is not poor. You're not richer than him. He asks you to sow. Now, sowing is the means by which the church achieves its goals. But for you, it is the means by which you increase. Now, that is a system that was set in place by God. So I tried to tell the pastor that, because I was close to him and I was a minister in the church, I told him, why don't we find a place where we also tithe? He refused. And I knew himself he wasn't tithing. But somehow, I continued giving money there. But because he wasn't exactly death, my seed withered. Now, how is withering? I stayed in that church for close to 10 years, and I saw my finances reducing steadily. Now, when something is scorched and it withers, let's say if you put grass outside, or some leaves outside, and they are scorched in the sun, they don't dry up and disappear all of a sudden. The reduction is gradual, but consistent. Now, consistently over those years, I saw my finances dwindling, and I kept on hoping at some stage something is going to happen, and I blossomed because I was a giver, and I wasn't understanding why I'm giving and I'm not getting a return. What I didn't know is that the place I was giving in was a clear example of what I'm saying here, where it withers. Your finances wither. Now, you must learn how to be your own judge, because you study your finances, and all the time you've been connecting to a certain place. Have you seen an increase? Everything that God does or has a hand in increases. So, after 10 years of seeing myself withering, I almost was left with nothing to wither. And guess what happened? The Lord revealed to me this, which I'm telling you right now. And I stopped giving there, and everything changed. Now, the third one fell among thorns, and thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no crop. Now, this is not as bad as the first two, but it's bad too because it does not produce, an increase. What does it stand for? Thorns cannot choke a plant until it has sprouted. Okay? Thorns cannot choke a seed. They choke a sprouted plant. So these are places where you go and sow your seed, and there will be some minor increase and something that appears like, and something sprouting, but does not produce fruit, but it sprouts. Now, when it would have produced fruit, then the thorns come in and choke it, and then there is no fruit. So you end up with no fruit, but it's not as bad as the death, it's not as bad as the withering, but it is bad because it does not produce the result you want. Now, this is true of certain churches which have become organizations. Now, where you're giving into a system and they are giving you accountability and audit and all that. Now you're contributing, that is not sowing. I mean, if a seed abides alone unless it falls into the ground and dies. If you're the kind of person who gives to your church and expects an audited accounts, then it means that you did not give in the first place. You donated, you did not sow. Because a seed, the Bible says, abides alone unless it falls in the ground and dies. But when it falls in the ground and dies, then it produces a lot more seed. That is true for everything. Now, when a church becomes an organization, like an NGO, involved in all these things and asking people to contribute money, we are saving people here, we are saving people that and that, which is all good, but which is not done in the principle of sowing money. So, and receive, then there is something wrong with that sort of thing. Now, it will not produce death, it will not produce withering, but it will not produce fruit either. Now, those are the three results that do not produce fruit. Now remember, the next one, it says, the next 3 produced results. Some produced 30-fold, some produced 60-fold, some produced 100-fold. Now imagine the same seed, the same sower, 6 different results. The only thing that changes is the ground. Don't ever forget that. So if you're sowing seed and your mindset is straight and you're not getting results, maybe it's about time you considered the ground. Is it good ground? In the next segment, I am going to give you examples of what is good ground and what is not good ground, and all from the scripture, by the way, so that you can know exactly where to sow your seed. Now, I'm giving you these things from the scripture. These things were revealed to me by God. I'm not giving you opinions, okay? I have practiced them for the last 7 years after they were revealed to me, and I can tell you that there is no more withering in my life. Now I'm expanding, I'm growing, because I follow these things. Now, still in Mark chapter 4, I'll end with this, verse 13, it says, do you not understand the parable that is of sowing? Then he says, how then will you understand all the other parables? Now, this principle of sowing and reaping, not just sowing money, but sowing everything and reaping, is the foundational principle of all parables. Now, Jesus said, if you do not understand it, how will you understand all the other parables? And remember, it says elsewhere that he spoke to them with parables only. So, if you don't understand the foundational parable, which is sowing and reaping, Jesus says, how then will you understand the rest? So, when I understood this, it opened my eyes to everything about the kingdom of God and how it operates, including from that same chapter, things which I perhaps will discuss with you at some other time. But right now, I've told you that the ground in which you sow matters. So remember, if you're sowing and not receiving and not reaping as you expect, as the word of God tells you you will, first of all, check your mindset. Secondly, check your ground. I will come back the next time telling you examples of good and bad ground. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.